Oh, don't move the mountain. Give me strength to climb. No, don't move my stumbling block. Lead me on. No, don't move mountain. Give me strength to climb. No, don't move my stumbling block. But lead me all around. Our cares we bring unto you. You told us, Lord, that we could. You promised to help those who help themselves, and I believe that you have mercy, Lord. Lord, don't you move the mountain. Just give me strength to climb. Lord, don't move my stumbling block. Lead me all around. The way may not be easy. You didn't say, Lord, that it would be. But when our tribulation get to light, we tend to stray from thee. Have mercy, please. Don't move the mountain. Just give me strength to climb. Lord, don't move my stumbling block, but lead your child on the right.
Okay, this is a brief presentation of where I used to live when I was illegally adopted back in 1972, Prescott, Arkansas. The only thing I can remember is that the courthouse looked almost like a Capitol building or like a castle. It had pillars. And from what I understand now, the courthouse that they have doesn't even have that. So I don't know, maybe the old one got torn down or turned into like a tourist visitor center. In any case, I outlined it in red so it gives you a general idea what the state of Arkansas looks like, because this is where I was at from the age of 2, from the time I was illegally adopted. My grandmother was on the run from the FBI. They didn't have parental kidnapping laws back then, at least not yet. But it's the simple fact that there was a warrant by the FBI for her arrest because she would cross many state lines. That makes it a federal offense. Disobeying a court order that I and my brother were to be returned to my father and mother in Portland, Multnomah County, Oregon, where I was born. And when I was growing up, I was told that, or I was led to believe that Waterloo, Arkansas was in Roston County. But you can never find that county name anywhere. So then it was supposed, or at least um, someone theorized, that they renamed the county from Roston to Nevada. It looks like it says Nevada, but it's the way you gotta pronounce it. Then we have kind of a general idea what the county here looks like with all the highways, and I think there's even some major freeways goes through here. But if you note, now I went to the fourth grade for a while at Stanwood at Seventh Adventist Private School, and this is skipping ahead a bit. While M.F. Fleckner, who is actually my grandmother but adopted me, so therefore I kind of referred to her as Mom because that's what I grew up believing, was selling her ski resort acreage property and attending land and title hearings in 1980. I was to give testimony on her behalf for something that apparently I heard or seen. I do remember I got in trouble for something that either I testified to, or because maybe if an attorney said, was I told to say this or something, being a kid, you want to tell the truth. And then, of course, well, okay, I tell the truth. That doesn't keep me from getting backhanded or switched for not saying something to help her win. Either way, I think she did eventually sell the ski resort property. After Leslie Ambrose passed on and was buried in Murfreesboro, Arkansas, we went back to Waterloo, Arkansas. I finished fourth grade in the Hope, Arkansas's Seventh Adventist private school by 1981, or at least within 1981. Emma Fleckner sold her Waterloo, Arkansas property to Pastor Risk of the Seventh Adventist Church. Then we moved to Farmington, Washington in 1982. From 1979 to 1980, I had started third grade, pulled from school as Emma Fleckner saw pregnant teens, and that didn't go well with her. She would have been considered a Bible thumper, and ended up finishing third grade at the time when I was starting fourth grade, or about to start fourth grade, and it was pulled from there due to KKK threats. Going back even further, I was raised in Waterloo, Arkansas from 1972 to 1980 and 1 year prior to 82 in Arkansas State. My first grade year was in Willisville, then homeschooled because Willisville were incompetent and could not hold on to shot records. And me and my brother Pete didn't enjoy homeschooling very much. I can go into details about that later. And then, of course, we went back to Willisville for our second grade year, which by that time, Pete and I were definitely thankful we didn't have to go through homeschooling anymore. That was from 1976 through 1978. Now, the interesting thing about Waterloo is that unless you knew what you were looking for, you'd probably drive right by it. You wouldn't even know it. And let's see if I can find it here. Sometimes I almost miss it myself. Okay, so it's not like a big town. It probably was back in the day, long before I was born. but it comes off of Highway 76, and it'll say Nevada 171 Road. Um, and then there's one that goes to the east. It's more of a loop, and the rest, of course, is barricaded off and anchors to the left. But even all during my time, because the road was barricaded off, never did ever see um, what was beyond the oil barrels, which were used as a barricade to keep people from going any further. So it pretty much is like a ghost town, as I would say, because you had people living there, yes, but it's not really a town. It's more like what they call an old term when people settle the country, a township, I guess if you want to call it that. As far as any cemeteries goes, if they hit a cemetery, it's beyond the barricade. I don't know, maybe they allow people from now on to go to the cemetery beyond the barricade, or perhaps they decided to make a cemetery for the people who lived in Waterloo. I've never been to it myself. Some of the key points that I think are important in my life, and this, it's not like a documentary or anything, because I hope that one day, after I've had the opportunity to be in movies or something, to make a documentary of what my life was like, so that I could leave something behind for people like in London, England, for example, or the United States, to keep as a historical artifact, if you want to call it that. It was not the most pleasant place to live, at least not in my opinion. So, as you look at the map here, you see I've made some notes. Okay. There was an old oil tower, not used, could be seen from the bedroom window where the house was that me and Pete lived with Maria Lechner and Leslie Ambrose Lechner, and eventually J.G. Brown, who at that time was 100 years of age and already seen Halley's Comet once and was about to see it a second time in his lifetime. We all know 75 years is the orbit of Halley's Comet. The property was once owned by Maria Lechner. Her closest neighbor was Mr. and Miss Herring. He had one arm, rode a riding mower, and we didn't even have to ask, but he would just come and mow her lawn because, well, she had her orchard right next to them. Leslie Ambrose Lechner was Maria's husband. He was blind and crippled, a retired judge of Friday Harbor, Washington, as I had been an informant before that, and an attorney. He is currently buried in Murfreesboro, Arkansas, home of the diamond mine. The barricade, like I said, you can't, as you see, you can't go any further past it. At least you couldn't back then. I'm presuming you still can't. The enemies that Maria Lechner had wasn't just the fact that she had to run and hide from the law. The Ku Klux Klan, or KKK, members were the carpenters. Now, it's not like I'm trying to slander anybody, but this is what I know from childhood, and it had been proven that the carpenters were racist and KKK members. Neo-Nazis or Aryan Nation hadn't been developed yet, at least not that I know of. So the KKK were the main force for what they would consider racial equality. I, again, being a kid, didn't know a whole lot about those kind of things. All I knew is they wore pillowcases and bed sheets. If I did something like that and cut holes in them, I probably would have got my butt switched. So in any case, they vandalized her garden, poisoned her dog Leo, and Dwight Carpenter ended up cutting his foot in a trap made by Emma Fleckner filled with manure and broken glass because he kept cutting her prize rose bush. J.T. Martin was friends of Maria Lechner. He lived up on one road that anchored off to the right before it made the loop. They had a daughter who I don't remember her name, but she sold Avon. And that daughter had a daughter and son, Becky, and a kid that was kind of fat, and I called him Big Tim. Their last name was Martin. Maria Lechner bought the property from Blaylocks. I don't know, they look like hippie dudes to me, but they seem kind of cool. Of course, I was, again, being a kid, don't know very much. Betty Bailey was a good friend of Maria Lechner, and I remember her because she always gave Peter and I bubble gum. So she became the bubble gum lady. But she was cool, she had a kind of a lazy eye, but she was still friendly enough. The Telfords lived next to Carpenters. I guess they didn't have really a whole lot of problem with the Carpenters. They pretty much stuck to themselves like Maria Lechner. And they introduced Maria Lechner to growing comfrey and some kind of like bean sprout thing, which isn't too bad in a salad. Darren Martin lived up the road from about a mile or so, and he used to deliver the paper called The Grit. Senator Mills was a babysitter. Her brother Delbert, I guess Maria Lechner couldn't stand him, but he eventually was killed or murdered. I'm not sure which it was, but either way. And so I never did see her again. I don't know why. At the end of the road, as you got to the main highway, 76, there was a building. You might think it was a store, but they called it the Voters Building. That seemed to be the only thing that ran on a seasonal basis when there was to be votes made by registered voters. There was an open water-filled oil hole. It was stagnant. It claimed one of our pets, mysteriously known as Lassie, which was the name of one of the two dogs we had. In any case, the Voters Building at the end of road at Highway 76. It only ran once a year during major elections or ballots to be voted on. And as I said, due to barricade, there was no post office, no local police, no store, etc. The Paytons were good friends of M.F. Lechner, one being a county sheriff, or I read quickly. So she had her colored friends, and I had mine as well. So this pretty much covers this brief era history in this part of the map. And like I said, I can give you more details later. So when we return, I'll go through a step-by-step here briefly with you, and you can get the idea in a more explained manner of where I lived and what things I can recall from memory. In 1972, I was only about 2 years of age because I was born March 26, 1970. As I said, the courthouse I remember, and I was remembering way back when I was very, very young, had pillars. So in Prescott, Arkansas, this was the courthouse that I went to in 1972. Now, I don't remember being on the stand, but apparently, from what I understand, I was. And the reason I remember this courthouse is because apparently some white dude was sitting on the steps and his butt crack was showing. Grandma Lechner had her opinions, that's for sure. And I remember she made the comment that, for every person who was considered uncouth and did not know how to dress themselves, she'd love to stick a tube down their pants with turpentine and see how fast they could run and looking for a bird bath to sit on. So, yeah, I definitely would remember that. This apparently is the courthouse now. Well, granted, it has pillars, but not like the ones I saw. So, it don't have the Capitol building look to it, like the one I went to. And so this is probably the modern day courthouse now. From 1973 to 1975, because I was not ready to go to public school yet, I didn't get to go to Head Start. I didn't get to go to preschool or kindergarten. So all during that time, I did see things like the American Bald Eagle, the Blue Jays. One thing unique about Arkansas is you have the cardinal, and the males were always bright red. The females were more of a brownish color. In Arkansas, you didn't have things like ringneck doves. They were known as the mourning doves because they had a special type of way of cooing. Still had the red breasted robin. And then he had something called the whippoorwills because of the way they whistled. Something like, and that was the sound of a whippoorwill call. You only find those type of birds in Arkansas State. They still had their hawks now and then, and they would hunt mice or whatever. And you had your buzzards. The turkey vulture was quite well known down there. Spotted owl was probably like the biggest owl known. Don't believe there was any snow owls in Arkansas. I could be wrong, but and we didn't live near any swamps, so that I'm aware of. The forest was pretty thick, so I don't know if there was any swamps around where we lived at or not. So we didn't really have too many run-ins with alligators, and I doubt we even had any crocodiles around. Do remember once there's this old pile of wood because once Grandma Lechner or Maria Lechner bought the property from the Blaylocks, she had gas heat installed, so she didn't have to deal with firewood. But this old firewood revealed a coral snake, something like this one, and it was considered to be just for safety. I don't know, maybe it was poisonous, but she had me and my brother get, as quick as we could away from the wood pile. I don't know if she killed it or not, but it was considered to be a very deadly venomous snake and not something you'd want to mess with. There was two types of skinks, but you had to make sure you knew which one you're playing with. Now, Pete and I occasionally would play with this skink like this one. We had no problem with it. The weird thing about it, though, is they would detach their body parts if they were pinned down, like their tail, and they didn't die from it. It's just kind of weird that way. The one that you didn't want to touch, that if it bit you would be considered poisonous, is the poisonous skink. We also had our chameleons. They were quite well known for trying to blend in with whatever color they landed on. And so the chameleons were kind of a cool thing. They'd crawl on the screen or something. They were quite plentiful. One time I thought I was going to help my Maria Lechner, you know, being a dumb kid, grabbed the Raid can, and there was this dinner plate sized nest under one of the old fashioned, like wood overhang, wooden shield type things, you know, that come over a window for keeping the rain from hitting the window or something. And made the dumb mistake of spraying the nest while it was daylight, and boy, did I get stung. I could have gotten a Pete switching, but Grandma or Maria Lechner kind of felt that I have already learned my lesson as she put me in the bathtub and washed them off me. So, yeah, I was quite dizzy for a while. Those brown hornets, man, they're not something you want to mess with. So at nighttime, she got back out and put kerosene on a broom handle and got rid of those guys. You know, there was the mud dauber. You always know them because they always make a mud tubing of some sort on your house or wherever they find a place to do it. And that was their nest. And they had this weird humming sound that they'd make when they're making the nest. I always thought these things were called locusts, but I think they call them katydids or kadids. And they would shed their skin just like a rattlesnake would shed its skin. So they were quite an interesting creature. They never really bit me, and I was being the curious kid. I always found them fascinating. So, you know, one would crawl on my hand, no big deal. There's a difference between them, this, and which is a locust. And some of those locusts, man, they got pretty good size, anywhere from 2 to 3 inches. Of course, we had the stink bug. Ugh, never really liked them. They had a bad, nasty peppermint smell. Crickets were kind of interesting. They'd be chirping at night, especially. Because you might hear one chirping only because one got in the house. And it was probably trying to find its way out. This is one thing that in Arkansas you really had to watch for. They had a different variety of ants, but these ones here, you feel like you would be on fire wherever they bit you at, because these were definitely fire ants. The real carpenter ant was very big size. They usually were kind of like the bumblebees. They be traveling alone, not in packs like the fire ants or the black and red ants. Carpenter ants, unfortunately, were not very good as far as trying to keep termites from eating your house. Then there was this guy, and you had to be careful because if you got stung by him, it's like somebody taking a dull needle and stabbing you in the finger. He was hairy, and I was able to pet one as long as he was on the ground, and had like soft fur all over him. And they were called a tiger ant. The other thing we had to worry about is that sickness people get from ticks. Pets were really affected by it because when the ticks would get enough blood from your pets, it got big and old fat. The tarantulas, believe it or not, we actually had. I guess there was a couple in the house at one time, and Maria Lightner said it sounded like they were fighting or something, because it was like knock, 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 or something like that. And there was these two great tarantulas fighting each other for some reason. I always seemed to freak her out because while they didn't really bite me, I kind of, being a dumb kid, would not purposely take it off, but I was able to pet it and and move about, because it didn't like being touched, but it never did really bite me. One time there was a scorpion, and I didn't think that Arkansas would even have those, but she ended up killing a scorpion where we lived at. The granddaddy longleg are the biggest known in Arkansas, not like the ones up in the northern states. Kind of a pinkish color, had an odd smell, but not too bad. They're known as the most poisonous spider in the whole world, but its mouth is too small to bite you. So, occasionally, you get to play with the granddaddy longleg, but they were able to kill all the spiders, so they were considered invaluable to Arkansas State because they would be so many of them that they could keep down the population of poisonous spiders. The other unique thing was the walking sticks. You don't see any of those in the northern states. And the reason why they were called walking sticks is because they could go onto a small branch or something. And the way they were like a chameleon, no bird could ever detect that they were there because they would be so still that you'd think they were part of the branch. You had to really know what you're looking for in order to find one. Or, like here, if they're crawling on a house, uh, probably carrying its mate or a baby on its back. Fireflies are really cool. They didn't bite as per se if one landed on you, which I had a couple land on me, but especially at nighttime, they like to glow in the dark. Armadillos were kind of an unusual creature. They were like the army tank of wildlife. They were hard to kill by any other creature because they had a hard shell on them, but they kind of had the weirdest looking ears and snout. So everything that they had on them was hard plated. They could curl up like a ball. No wild animal could ever get to them. The possums were about as big as a Shih Tzu. I kid you not. Um, the biggest problem that Maria Lechner had with them, and she's killed at least 3 of them when I was a kid, is they'd get into the chicken coop at night and literally eat the chicken alive from the rear end. And so as the chicken's squawking, she'd go out and see what's going on. Oh, yep, there's the possum. So she'd take a marlin spike and bash its brains in until it was dead. The wolves were not some that would come down in the general area where people lived, but I had a dog named Peppy, and it was apparent that wolves had ripped him apart in different pieces, and so Peppy, the wire-haired terrier, was lost to wolves. Another reason why people just don't wander in the woods is because, like these hunters here, who seem to have done a good job getting the Arkansas razorback, they moved very fast. They would either try to stab you in both eyes with their tusks, or could literally, probably in a somewhat way, rip you apart. They, you wouldn't know if you had a razorback path that you were crossing or not until it's too late. The one thing the wolves and foxes, of course, didn't have the upper hand in is if a condor. And these were like just super giant birds, like a vulture. Condor could take up a wolf or a fox and fly off with it. So pretty much that wolf was done. The wingspans were almost like that of a jetliner, from what I remember. In 1973, Skylab was the very first space station. I was about 3 years old then. And it was launched um, from what we could see on television. This is the information that most people probably don't know about it, and you can find it on the Wikipedia, the free online encyclopedia. Skylab was the first United States space station launched by NASA, occupied for about 24 weeks between May 1973 and February 1974. It was operated by um, three astronaut crews, SL-2, SL-3, and SL-4. Major operations included an orbital workshop, a solar observatory, Earth observation, and hundreds of experiments. Unfortunately, unable to be reboosted by the space shuttle, which was not ready until the early 1980s, Skylab's orbit decayed and it burned up in the atmosphere on July 11, 1979, over the Indian Ocean. Well, believe it or not, come 1979, we would see this long line of fire after a single sonic boom that sounded like an explosion, but we didn't hear anything that came after this line of fire going over our house. And come later to find out that was Skylab. So that would be coming up in 1979, and so that's just a heads up as to something that will be covered at the right timeline. So overall, we just didn't wander in the woods because if the wild animals didn't get you, there were the unattended oil holes that apparently, when Waterloo was abandoned, they never bothered filling in or cleaning up. So the oil, of course, as law of science goes, sinks to the bottom, and you see, you think it's a pond water until you get out there and you get caught up in that oil and they just suck you under and you're dead. You're never seen again. Then, of course, there's the quicksand. You might think it's solid ground, but it's not. And in spite of what nature shows tell you, okay, there is quicksand that will completely swallow you up. Not all quicksand is of the same material. So they just have not have been able to go into the ones of the southern states where it's so liquidy that by the time your legs do get stuck in some solid, you're already underwater and you're drowned, you're dead. So what's the point? So the oil tower, now that was kind of interesting. It was rusted. It looked like it hadn't been used in years from what I could see when I was a kid. This diagram here shows you what a normal oil tower would look like. So what I could see from outside the window, which could have been, I don't know, and I'm just judging it now because at the time I was still learning my math, and I'd say either a half football field away or maybe, 200 yards, something like that, give or take a few feet, in thick tall grass, which you didn't go into because you had to worry about rattlesnakes and the cotton mouths. So the only part that was remaining was the part that didn't have the second or the first like walkabout terrace on it. And it was sometimes the ideal thing that would scare the heck out of me and my brother because lightning bolt would strike that. And it'd be this loud, explosive, thunderous sound that rattled the whole house, including the windows, almost to the point where the windows would be ready to shatter just from the shock wave. Most oil holes didn't have water in them. I would imagine this oil hole, as an example, would have been one beyond the barricade at the shutdown oil refinery, but but there was one oil hole that had oil in it, but you would have thought it was just some big old round circular pond of water, or crater, if you will. Well, in 1976, um, I'm 6 years old. My brother Pete's 5. We start school at Willisville, Arkansas. During that year, learned my ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. Yes, isn't that amazing? I've made some friends. Um, I heard somebody by the name of Frida. Um, there was the root beer lady's daughters. Um, and I can't remember what the root beer lady's name was, but she was infamous for making homemade root beer. So that's where we'd get our root beer for Pete and I were good. She'd go to the Marina Electner would go to the root beer lady and buy the root beer from her. And of course, there was Audrey Biddle. She lived in Roston, Arkansas. We'd get our homemade milk, cottage cheese, butter, buttermilk from her. So she was the milk lady. And during that year of 1976, I think the epidemic or pandemic, if you will, at that time was trichinosis, either because people weren't cooking pork very well or what have you, and so people were dying from that. Nothing like you have these days where a virus gets you and it takes many, many people, but back then that was considered a big thing. And so the health department finally figured out where trichinosis came from. So I don't have a whole lot of photos on uh, Willisville, and it seems like nobody else has actually contributed to some anyway. Well, Willisville was kind of a fairly good sized town. From what I understand, the tornado activity, because I had been through a few myself, uh, the ones that pertain to me when I lived down there, I don't see listed. But believe me, there were tornadoes that missed us, thank goodness. Others, unfortunately, were not so fortunate. The earthquake activity, on the other hand, I do remember some of those. You could feel the shock waves traveling. For example, on March 25th, one day before my birthday, the same year I started first grade, 1976, at they say 4120. Well, actually, what that probably means is, since I got a zero, means it's probably like 41 minutes after midnight. A magnitude of 5.0, classed as moderate intensity, earthquake occurred at 223.9 miles away from the city center of Willisville. It was enough to where sometimes if we did feel something, Maria Legner would be like, "Hey, you boys, did you feel that? Are you moving around on the bed?" No. Why would you be moving around on the bed? Because we were laying down sleeping. So the vibration came from the earthquake. So another one occurred in 1976 on March 25th again. And this is interesting. The same day at 1:11, 1 o'clock in the morning. Okay. A magnitude of 4.5 again. Not as big. Earthquake 216 miles, 216.2 miles away from the city center of Willisville. So apparently, there's maybe a couple of locations where these earthquakes occurred. It was enough to where if we did feel something, it's like somebody's trying to shake the bed or something, but that's about it. Nothing major. in 1977, um, there was an issue with Willisville, Arkansas's public school losing shot records. From what I gather, that Peter and I weren't the only ones that had this issue. So we had two sets of DPT and polio shots already, and they kept saying that Maria Lechner never got us the shots. I should remember because I had to get my butt stuck all the time with the needle. But Miss Holland, or whoever the administrator was at that time, insisted that we couldn't go to second grade until we got the shot records. Maria Lechner then told the public school at Willisville that she'll go ahead and get the shot records if they accepted the charge for murder, probably what you would call negligible murder, by enforcing a third set of DPT and polio shots. Basically, Willisville was incompetent because it couldn't seem to hang on to the shot records when they were turned in. So Peter and I got overdosed on DPT and polio and ran a temp over 100 for our age. That would be considered lethal. Well, then Willisville used that as an excuse. Well, because they're sick, they can't go to school this year. So we got held back. So we ended up going through homeschooling. And believe me, that was no picnic. You misspell a word, you got backhanded in the mouth or P-switched. If you didn't do a math problem right, you got P-switched. It didn't matter what we did, even though she bought homemade old-style desks. If you spelled something wrong, pretty much it was almost like hell in itself. The way we felt, it was like torture. And believe me, homeschooling was not the best. Usually if a kid gets something wrong, you don't like hit them in the mouth or Pete switch them. I mean, we're not born Einstein with the gift of knowledge of knowing how to spell properly from the day we're born. But again, we are talking real life there. As you can see here, like I said, one of the things I do remember from memory is that you could look out one of the bedroom windows and see this old oil tower. Didn't have the walkway type platform at midway area, so they must have took everything down except for that last part of it. And it was through thick grass, but again with poisonous snakes and everything else, or maybe grass overgrown a hole where the oil tower was at. It was just something you didn't do. You didn't just go wander off in grass that's tall enough to be over your head. So occasionally lightning would hit it, and it would sound like a massive explosion of rumbling that would shake the house so violently that we almost thought the windows were going to blow out. On other occasions, when a tornado would come, we would have to hide in the hallway, and it would sound, when it was like, in my mind as a kid, like somebody turning on Grandma Lechner's Electrolux canister vacuum, and the wind just kept going and going and going, louder and louder. Fortunately, the tornado never got close to us, but because it did well, we'll call it a flyby, the wind itself was just a very loud roaring sound. Sometimes Pete and I's ears would plug up, and they wouldn't unplug until the whole thing was over finally. So 1977 was not the best year to do homeschooling and go through other elements like tornadoes and severe lightning storms. By the time I was ready to go back into third grade, Louisville did not give any credit for the homeschooling that Maria Lechner had given us. So we ended up going through second grade at public school anyway. But believe me, when it came time to go back to public school, Pete and I saw this as like, hallelujah. No more Pete switches or being backhanded in the mouth or misspelling words or getting math problems wrong. So we couldn't wait to go back to public school.